An African-American maintenance worker concealed her identity as a military aviator for 8 years before being forced to demonstrate her abilities in a fighter jet cockpit. Captain Bradley Thompson declared to the gathered personnel at Riverside Air Force Base that they would provide their beloved janitor with a lesson in modesty, pointing at Kesha Williams and suggesting they show her what it felt like to sit where real aviators belong. The cruel amusement from other military personnel filled the frigid morning atmosphere. Kesha stood still, grasping her cleaning tool tightly, her brown gaze directed at the concrete ground. She had performed maintenance duties for 8 lengthy years. At 42, she had perfected the skill of remaining unnoticed, maintaining a lowered head, moving carefully, never confronting authority figures. Thompson exemplified the typical privileged military officer the base had produced in great numbers. As a politician's child, he had completed his Harvard education through family influence, and had never encountered situations where his arrogance wasn't protected by political power. Thompson yelled more aggressively, moving toward her in his shining military boots, addressing her as the black maintenance worker. He stated that her problem was that her people believed they could achieve anything because of modern diversity initiatives. For a brief moment, Kesha closed her eyes and allowed herself to remember the sound of F-22 Raptor turbines at combat altitude. The experience of total control over a machine worth $150 million. That was before everything collapsed, before the conspiracy, before her identity was permanently destroyed. Kesha slowly lifted her gaze. For an instant, something dangerous flashed in her eyes, a spark Thompson mistook for fear but was actually something far more complex. She calmly stated that she needed to finish cleaning the northern area, her voice showing no emotion. This was the same response she had given for years whenever someone tried to provoke her. Thompson smiled maliciously, saying that cleaning could wait but the education she was about to receive could not be delayed. Lieutenant Jamie Foster, offspring of a general and Thompson's apprentice, rushed to bring worn flight equipment and a damaged helmet. The prank had been planned the previous night at the officers' club, put the black cleaning woman in an F-16 fighter, and record her inevitable humiliation. Thompson spoke her name with deliberate scorn, explaining she would enter that cockpit, pretend to know what she was doing, and they would have entertainment. Foster held his phone, already imagining millions of views, thinking this would become viral faster than popular internet content about a cleaning lady attempting to be a top pilot. Kesha accepted the equipment without resistance. As she put on the flight suit, her hands moved with precision nobody noticed, fingers automatically adjusting straps and gear with suspicious familiarity, like muscle memory that never disappears. Thompson gestured dramatically to the small crowd that had formed, announcing that ladies and gentlemen would witness the moment their esteemed janitor learned about boundaries and proper places. Kesha walked toward the F-16 with measured steps. The aircraft was ready for routine operations, fully fueled with functioning systems. As she climbed the ladder, a memory flashed through her mind of her last flight before everything ended, when she was still Captain Kesha Phoenix Williams. Thompson shouted from below, hoping she wouldn't vomit in his plane, stating that F-16 was worth more than her entire family would earn in 10 lifetimes. But when Kesha settled into the pilot's seat, something extraordinary happened. The cockpit welcomed her like a familiar embrace. Her hands found the controls with surgical precision. Her eyes scanned the instruments with professional speed. For one nearly imperceptible moment, she forgot where she was. The transformation was subtle but unmistakable. Her shoulders straightened, her breathing became controlled, and something in the atmosphere changed completely. Thompson noticed the shift and frowned, asking what she was doing up there and telling her not to touch anything. Kesha took a deep breath, her hands hovering over the controls like a pianist facing a keyboard after years of forced silence. For 8 years she had kept her secret buried, living as a shadow of her former self. But something in this man's cruel arrogance sparked a decision she had been postponing for a long time. Her fingers found the ignition sequence. A simple choice separated her from a lifetime of silent humiliation or a moment that would change everything forever. The question wasn't whether she knew how to fly. The question was whether she was willing to show the world who she really was. In the makeshift audience, some of the older mechanics began to notice details that the officers overlooked. The way she automatically adjusted the mirrors, how her feet found the pedals without hesitation, how her hands moved across the controls with familiarity impossible for a cleaning lady. The roar of the F-16's engines echoed through the hangar with such precision that several mechanics stopped working and looked up in surprise. Kesha had executed the ignition sequence with the speed and smoothness of someone who had done it thousands of times, not like a nervous cleaning lady trying to fake competence. Thompson shouted, his initial confidence beginning to waver, wondering how she knew to do that without instructions. Foster continued filming, but something in his expression changed as he noted she didn't even hesitate and looked like she was born in that cockpit. Through the cockpit glass, Kesha checked instruments with fluid, automatic movements. Her fingers danced across the controls like a pianist playing a familiar melody. Each gesture revealed years of experience that no cleaning lady should possess. Thompson felt a chill of unease, but his ego wouldn't allow him to admit he was wrong, claiming it was just beginner's luck and any fool could start an engine if they pressed enough buttons. He picked up the radio from the control tower, telling her she'd had enough fun and to turn everything off and get down before causing damage. The response came back clear and professional over the communication system, requesting clearance to taxi using standard aviation communication procedures with terminology that took years to master completely. The silence that followed was deafening. Thompson muttered in confusion, his face turning pale, saying she shouldn't know radio protocols. But Kesha knew much more than protocols. 8 years ago, she was Captain Kesha Phoenix Williams, the first black woman to command an elite Air Force squadron, earning her nickname for her supernatural ability to emerge victorious from impossible situations. Everything changed on a reconnaissance mission over hostile territory in the Middle East. Her team discovered evidence of an American general selling weapons to terrorist groups. General Morrison, who happened to be the father-in-law of then Colonel Thompson, the father of the captain who was now humiliating her. When Kesha reported the discovery, she found herself at the center of a deadly conspiracy. Documents were forged, witnesses were bought, and from national heroine, she became a scapegoat with charges of leaking classified military information to the enemy, the very crime she had tried to expose. Someone in the crowd shouted that she was moving the plane. Thompson ran toward the runway, talking frantically on his radio, ordering her to stop immediately as she was not authorized to move that aircraft. But Kesha was already taxiing with pinpoint precision, maintaining constant speed and perfect alignment, techniques that demonstrated not only knowledge but absolute mastery. Thompson ordered Foster to call base security, claiming this was military aircraft theft and she would be arrested for this. Foster hesitated, his camera still rolling, noting that her performance wasn't luck but showed she knew exactly what she was doing. Thompson exploded, his mask of superiority finally cracking, insisting she was just a cleaning lady who probably watched instructional videos and thought she could fly a military fighter jet. But in the back of his mind, a terrible suspicion was beginning to form about that competence, that familiarity with military procedures, the way she had behaved for years on the base, always present, always watching, but never truly invisible to those who knew what to look for. The F-16 was now positioned at the head of the main runway, engines warming up with the characteristic sound of a machine ready to fly. Kesha was following pre-flight protocols with precision that would make veteran pilots envious. An older mechanic, a 30-year veteran, whispered that he knew that style and had seen that precision before, but it had been a long time. Thompson grabbed the man by the arm, demanding to know what he was getting at. The mechanic replied hesitantly that there was a female pilot years ago called Phoenix who flew just like that, as if the machine was part of her body. Thompson said quickly that Phoenix was dead, she had disappeared, and it had nothing to do with this situation. But his eyes couldn't tear themselves away from the figure in the cockpit, and for the first time in his privileged life, Thompson felt something he had never experienced before: real fear that his actions would have consequences. On the runway, Kesha finished her final pre-flight checks. Through her headset, she could hear Thompson shouting contradictory orders to the control tower, his voice growing higher with every passing second. Each new attempt by Thompson to appear in control only revealed how desperately out of control he really was. The man who minutes earlier had mocked a mere cleaning lady now faced the terrifying reality that he had completely underestimated his victim. And Kesha hadn't even taken off yet. Every insult Thompson had hurled, every cruel laugh from the crowd, every moment of humiliation from the past 8 years was being carefully catalogued in her memory, not to fuel anger, but to calibrate the precision of the lesson she was about to teach. What Thompson didn't know was that Phoenix Williams had spent 8 years not just hiding, but preparing. And today, in front of dozens of cameras and hundreds of witnesses, she was about to show the world that some phoenixes don't die but just wait for the right moment to rise from the ashes more powerful than ever. Thompson grabbed the radio from the chief controller's hand, ordering her to shut down the engines and claiming this was military insubordination. She replied with technical coldness that flight clearance had been granted for training procedures in accordance with military regulations, causing several veterans at the base to exchange worried glances. Foster continued filming, but his expression had completely changed as he noted she knew the regulations better than they did and questioned how a cleaning lady knew that. Thompson hissed for him to shut up and keep recording, sweat beginning to form on his forehead, stating that when she crashed on that runway, he wanted everything documented for the court-martial. But in the control tower, something extraordinary was happening. Colonel James Mitchell, commander of air operations and a 30-year veteran, watched the proceedings through binoculars with growing disbelief. He called to his nearest assistant, asking if he was seeing what he was seeing. The assistant confirmed that pre-flight procedures were being executed with absolute military precision, optimal warm-up time, and perfect positioning on the runway, noting this was not the work of an amateur. Mitchell lowered his binoculars slowly, asking about years of service, then reflecting that in his entire career, he had seen only one person fly with that kind of technical precision in ground procedures. Mitchell paused, a terrible suspicion taking shape in his mind, mentioning Phoenix Williams. The assistant choked, noting that Phoenix was declared dead 8 years ago as a traitorous officer who sold military information. Mitchell corrected firmly that she was an innocent officer, stating he was on the original investigation committee. The documents that incriminated her were so poorly forged that a child could have spotted them, but Morrison had political connections and Phoenix was a black woman with no one to support her. On the runway, Kesha finished her final checks with fluid movements that demonstrated not just competence but absolute mastery. Mitchell ordered his assistant to open a secure channel with that pilot immediately. When the secure channel opened, Mitchell identified himself and requested proper identification. There was a long pause before the reply came, laden with contained emotion. Mitchell whispered if it was really Phoenix, his voice breaking. She replied that she was Kesha Davis, Level 2 Janitor, and that Phoenix Williams died 8 years ago, though there were tears in her voice. Mitchell closed his eyes, remembering the bright young captain who had been destroyed by corrupt men, stating he had tried to help her but by the time he discovered the truth about Morrison and the conspiracy, it was too late. She acknowledged his efforts, noting that General Morrison was dead but his legacy lived on. She looked directly at Thompson through the glass of the cabin, explaining that Morrison's son married Colonel Thompson Sr.'s daughter, making the arrogant captain the grandson of one of the men who destroyed her career. The revelation hit Mitchell like a physical blow, understanding that Thompson was family of the conspiracy that framed her. She confirmed this was third generation of military privilege built on her ruin, explaining that for 8 years, she cleaned the toilets he soiled, listened to his racist jokes, and endured his arrogance while he had no idea that the black cleaning lady was the pilot his ancestors destroyed. Mitchell asked if she had evidence of the original conspiracy. She confirmed 8 years of gathering, explaining that Morrison confessed everything on his deathbed to a priest, thinking he was protected by religious confidentiality, but the priest recorded everything and gave her the complete confession 3 years ago. She smiled for the first time in years, stating she had names, dates, offshore bank accounts, and forged documents. Mitchell questioned why this information hadn't come to light sooner. She replied that she wanted more than justice, she wanted them to destroy themselves with their own arrogance, observing Thompson having a nervous breakdown on the runway while noting that people like Thompson only learn when they are humiliated publicly. Foster continued recording, now broadcasting live to social media accounts where the video was already accumulating thousands of views. Comments began flooding and questioning who this woman was, noting she flew better than any pilot they had ever seen, and observing that Thompson appeared to be losing control. Mitchell made a decision that would change everything, asking if she still remembered how to perform advanced aerial demonstrations. She confirmed she remembered like it was yesterday. He then authorized her to show those individuals what a real pilot could do, granting full clearance for an unrestricted aerial demonstration and instructing her to clear her name the only way that mattered by proving they never deserved to breathe the same air as her. Kesha felt something she hadn't experienced in 8 years: hope mixed with purpose. She acknowledged the instructions and requested clearance for a full air show. Clearance was granted with instructions to show them what it meant to fly with honor. On the runway, Thompson realized he had completely lost control of the situation. His game had turned into something much bigger, and he was beginning to suspect that he had catastrophically underestimated the woman he had spent years humiliating. The sound of the F-16's engines changed pitch, indicating preparation for actual takeoff. Thompson looked up at the blue sky and, for the first time in his privileged life, felt true fear of what he was about to witness. Kesha positioned the aircraft at the end of the runway, 8 years of controlled anger and silent dignity turning into pure determination. She was no longer just flying a plane but resurrecting Phoenix Williams from the grave where cowardly men had buried her. What Thompson didn't know was that he wasn't about to witness just an air show but the rebirth of a legend, and his own destruction would be the fuel that fed the flames of that resurrection. The F-16 roared down the runway with acceleration that made observers instinctively recoil. In 3 seconds, Kesha was airborne, and in 5, she executed a vertical turn that defied the laws of physics. What followed was not just an aerial demonstration but a work of art written in the sky. Thompson watched from the ground, his face turning white then green as he realized the magnitude of his mistake, muttering that it was impossible for a cleaning lady to fly like that. Foster noted that the video already had 50,000 live views with comments asking who this incredible pilot was. At an altitude of 1,500 meters, Kesha performed advanced maneuvers that few American pilots could master. The F-16 literally stopped in midair, raised its nose 90 degrees, and resumed normal flight in a display of control that made veteran mechanics applaud spontaneously. An air traffic controller whispered that he had only seen that maneuver once in his life, 8 years ago, performed by the legendary Phoenix Williams. Thompson grabbed the radio with trembling hands, ordering her to come down immediately as a direct order. The response came loaded with 8 years of silent dignity finally released, refusing his order and stating that he wanted an educational demonstration, and that was exactly what he was getting. What happened over the next 10 minutes redefined the concept of aeronautical mastery. Kesha executed a sequence of maneuvers that combined technical precision with pure artistry, including inverted loops at impossible speeds, low-level approaches that made people throw themselves to the floor, and culminating in a formation that spelled out the word Phoenix in the sky using contrails. Foster, now broadcasting to multiple platforms simultaneously, narrated with a trembling voice that he didn't know who this woman was, but she was rewriting everything they knew about flying, with 100,000 people watching live. In the control tower, Mitchell smiled for the first time in years and activated the base's open channel, announcing to all Riverside personnel that they were witnessing the return of Captain Kesha Phoenix Williams, betrayed and hunted by a military conspiracy 8 years ago, but who never lost her skills or honor. The silence that followed was broken only by the distant roar of engines. On the runway, Thompson dropped the radio, his world collapsing in real time, whispering that Phoenix Williams was supposed to be dead and was a traitor. A veteran mechanic approached with anger in his eyes, stating that she was cleaning his toilets for 8 years while he humiliated the best pilot this nation had ever produced, and they filmed it all. Kesha's landing was a final demonstration of skill, touching the runway so softly that it seemed as if the plane had simply decided to stop flying. When the cockpit door opened, a crowd of hundreds had gathered, including officers rushing in from other parts of the base. Thompson tried one last desperate gambit, claiming this proved nothing and that she could have learned to fly anywhere, insisting she was still just a worker. Mitchell interrupted over the loudspeaker, suggesting Thompson check his cell phone as his performance today had gone viral with 50 million views in the last 2 hours. Thompson's legs gave out as he realized he had been filmed humiliating a national hero, and the whole world was watching. His phone exploded with calls from the Pentagon, reporters, and angry superiors. Kesha stepped out of the cockpit with the same quiet dignity she had maintained for 8 years. She removed her helmet, revealing eyes that had seen real combat and survived betrayal. When she spoke, her voice reached every corner of the base, explaining that for 8 years she cleaned the bathrooms where officers like Thompson made jokes about diversity and competence, hearing every cruel word, every racist comment, every statement that people like her didn't belong in military aviation. She paused, looking directly at the cameras, stating that today she proved that competence has no color, no gender, and definitely no fear of small men with big egos. Thompson tried to hide in the crowd, but Foster followed him with the camera, asking if he would like to comment on humiliating one of the greatest pilots in American military history. Thompson stammered that he didn't know, and if he had known who she was exactly, he would have acted differently. Kesha interrupted, her voice cutting through the air like a knife, stating that the problem was how he treated people he believed were inferior to him, which revealed exactly who he really was. Mitchell appeared on the tarmac carrying an official military briefcase, offering her full restoration of rank, immediate promotion to major, and command of any squadron she desired on behalf of the United States Air Force. Kesha looked at the folder, then at the crowd of faces, some ashamed, some admiring, all transformed by what they had witnessed. For 8 years she had imagined this moment, but now that it had arrived, her response surprised even her. What Thompson didn't know was that the public humiliation he had just suffered was only the beginning, as the evidence Kesha had collected over 8 years about the conspiracy that destroyed her career was about to come to light, and his entire political family would be dragged down with him. But that would only be part of the lesson the world was about to learn about underestimating those with true power. Kesha looked at the folder offered by Colonel Mitchell, then at the hundreds of faces watching her in absolute silence. When she finally spoke, her voice carried 8 years of quiet dignity turned into power. She told Colonel Mitchell that she deeply appreciated the offer of reinstatement, but during these 8 years she had learned something that no rank could teach. She paused, handing the folder back, explaining that she had learned that her identity did not depend on the recognition of others and that she was Phoenix Williams with or without a uniform. Thompson, still kneeling on the tarmac, watched his military career evaporate in real time. His phone wouldn't stop ringing with calls from the Pentagon, furious superiors, and reporters hungry for statements. The hashtag Phoenix Janitor had become a worldwide trend with 80 million views. But she continued, stating there was one thing she needed to do, removing a flash drive from her pocket. For 8 years she had been collecting evidence about the conspiracy that destroyed her career, including deathbed confessions, forged documents, offshore bank accounts, and recordings of compromising conversations. Mitchell took the device with trembling hands as she explained this was the complete truth about General Morrison and his network of corruption, including how the Thompson family profited from selling weapons to terrorist groups. She looked directly at the devastated captain, stating that his grandfather built his fortune on American blood and he inherited much more than privilege, he inherited guilt. The consequences were immediate and devastating. Within 72 hours, the federal investigation had frozen the Thompson family's accounts, uncovered decades of military corruption, and initiated criminal proceedings against dozens of officers. Bradley Thompson was arrested for obstruction of justice while attempting to destroy evidence. Foster, who had filmed everything, became an instant celebrity when his live broadcast broke audience records. In a later interview, he stated he thought he was filming a cruel prank but ended up documenting the rebirth of a legend. 3 months later, Kesha was sitting in her new office as director of the Phoenix Aviation Academy, a school she had founded to train pilots from marginalized communities. The wall behind her desk displayed a photo of her standing next to the F-16 the moment she removed her helmet after landing. Her assistant informed her they had received 50 more applications that day, with applicants from every state. Kesha smiled, watching young people from diverse backgrounds training on flight simulators through the window. She explained to her assistant that the difference between privilege and competence was that privilege fears competition, while competence embraces it. The Thompson family empire had completely collapsed with companies nationalized, properties confiscated, and Bradley serving a 15-year sentence for military treason. His wife had left him, his children had changed their surname, and he had become a social outcast. Mitchell, now General Mitchell after a meteoric promotion, visited the academy regularly, questioning why she chose this path when she could have any military command she wanted. She replied that the best revenge wasn't destroying enemies but building something they could never create, a place where competence matters more than connections. Kesha's transformation had inspired systemic changes across the Air Force, with new protocols implemented to protect whistleblowers, diversity investigations ramped up, and the Thompson case becoming required reading at military academies. During a national interview, she reflected on her biggest mistake, stating that for 8 years, she believed she lost her identity when she lost her rank, but true identity cannot be taken away by decree and can only be given up voluntarily. Thompson, from his cell in military prison, watched news reports about the Phoenix Academy's growing success, realizing that the woman he had humiliated as a mere janitor was now training the next generation of elite military pilots. Foster, whose video had changed everything, became a documentary filmmaker specializing in exposing social injustice, stating that the broadcast taught him that sometimes the most important story is happening right in front of us, but we choose to ignore it. On the first anniversary of the revelation, Kesha received the Congressional Medal of Honor for her years of military service and social impact. In her speech, she stated not to let others define limitations, explaining that for 8 years, they told her she was just a janitor, but she chose to be the best janitor she could be while keeping alive the pilot she had always been. The Academy had become a national symbol of meritocracy and second chances, with students who had been rejected by traditional academies for lack of suitable profile now flying some of the most advanced aircraft in the world. Thompson lost everything: family, fortune, freedom, and legacy. But Kesha had gained something immeasurable: proof that dignity preserved in silence becomes the most powerful force when finally unleashed. She taught her students that revenge is not doing to others what they did to us, but becoming so successful that they regret ever doubting us. 8 years cleaning toilets had taught Phoenix Williams that dirt can be removed with hard work and patience, but some stains on the reputation of those who underestimate others are permanent. The story demonstrates that being underestimated is sometimes the greatest gift enemies can give, as they let their guard down just when someone is preparing to fly higher than they ever imagined possible.